I am Scott Payton. I'm the State Director for Right on Crime in Louisiana, and I will be moderating today's conversation. I would like to ask Father Blake Dubrock, who is the parochial vicar of Sacred Heart of Jesus Catholic Church in Ville Platte, where I serve as their permanent deacon, to lead us in the opening prayer. If everyone would please rise for the prayer, and then remain standing for the presentation of colors by the Louisiana Probation and Parole Color Guard, the singing of the national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Father Dubrock, thank you.
Let us bow our heads and pray for God's blessing. Almighty, eternal, and ever-present God, you are just and merciful, and for you these attributes are simple and one. But for man, they appear more complex, and so we ask that you send your spirit of guidance, counsel, and understanding on us today, that we may be ambassadors of your goodness and truth. Lord, you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to reconcile the sinner, to give hope to the hopeless, and redemption to the suffering. Embolden us to be heralds of reform for all men and women of goodwill. Lord, we, your humble servants, come before you and ask for your gentleness and mercy in our own lives. We ask that you hear the prayers of our hearts and of all those who call out to you in their need. For you are the one true God, and we offer this prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. And if you turn around, the flag will be in the back.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Thank you, Father Dubrock, and thank you to the Louisiana Probation and Parole Color Guard for the presentation of colors. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Marilyn Weil for singing the national anthem. Marilyn is a graduate of St. John Paul the Great Academy in Lafayette and is currently a student here at LSU. St. John Paul the Great Academy was founded by our Texas Public Policy Foundation and Right on Crime's Executive Director, Dr. Kevin Roberts. Thank you, Marilyn, for honoring our country with your wonderful voice. Lastly, I would like to thank Webb Reed for leading us in the pledge. Webb and his wife Ruth are from Melville, Louisiana, and have been good friends of our family for many years. Webb and Ruth are a Gold Star family, parents of Army Staff Sergeant Jonathan Reed, a member of the Louisiana Army National Guard, who died January 28, 2005 in an explosion while on patrol in western Baghdad. Thank you, Ruth and Webb, for being here today. A little background about Right on Crime. Right on Crime is a national campaign of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. It is a think tank that contributed to the architecture that was a successful Texas criminal justice reform effort. And I would like to add that Texas just announced the closing of 2 additional prisons as a result of these reforms, bringing the total to 10 prisons closed in the state of Texas. Right on Crime supports conservative solutions for reducing crime, restoring victims, reforming offenders, and lowering taxpayer cost. While the movement was born in Texas in 2007, in recent years, dozens of states such as Georgia, Ohio, Kentucky, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Louisiana have led the way in implementing conservative criminal justice reforms. Right on Crime entered Louisiana in 2016 and worked with many of the people in this room to pass the 2017 Justice Reinvestment Initiative reforms. Today, we will hear from Alice Marie Johnson and Kelly Paul, who are both known nationally for their criminal justice advocacy. They will offer 2 perspectives of our criminal justice system here in America, the need for conservative criminal justice policies, and give some insight into how those of us here today can help make Louisiana reentry ready. First, I would like to thank all of you for being here this morning. We have members of the Louisiana legislature, representatives from the city of Baton Rouge, and other elected officials. Secretary LeBlanc with the Department of Corrections, along with the headquarters staff of probation and parole, and criminal justice stakeholders from across the state. I would like now to introduce our 2 panelists and begin our panel discussion. Our first panelist is Alice Marie Johnson, my colleague and senior fellow at Right on Crime. Alice grew up in Olive Branch, Mississippi. She was a longtime resident of Memphis, Tennessee, but she currently resides in Chandler, Arizona. In 1996, Alice was sentenced to a mandatory life sentence plus 25 years without the possibility of parole for her role in a nonviolent federal drug case. This was her first and only conviction ever. Her story received worldwide attention when reality star and business mogul Kim Kardashian West advocated for her release from prison. On June 6, 2018, President Donald J. Trump granted clemency to Alice Marie Johnson, and the world watched as she ran across the street into the arms of her family. During her nearly 22 years of incarceration, Alice accomplished what has been termed as extraordinary rehabilitation. She received numerous certifications while in prison and became renowned as a gifted playwright. She was also ordained a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Alice Marie Johnson was an invited guest of President Trump at his State of the Union address in February 2019, where she received a resounding bipartisan standing ovation. She was honored as one of 4 women designated as a woman's right defender at the United Nations on International Women's Day, March 8, 2019. Alice Marie Johnson was also honored along with Kim Kardashian West and Sean Hawley with the 2019 CAOC Advocate for Justice Award. She has appeared on numerous media outlets advocating for criminal justice reform. She has been a featured speaker panelist at many events since receiving her clemency, which includes colleges, universities, churches, summits, Google, YouTube, Essence Festival, and the National Civil Rights Museum. She was featured in the November 2019 issue of Essence magazine. Alice Marie Johnson has been deemed a catalyst for the successful passage of the First Step Act. Since being granted clemency, she has steadfastly committed herself to continue to fight for criminal justice reform and for the women and men who are still incarcerated. Alice Marie Johnson is a published author with her memoir, Afterlife, My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom, which was published on May 21st, 2019. She is a proud mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Please join me in welcoming my colleague, Alice Marie Johnson. Yeah, that first step is a tough step. Our second panelist is Miss Kelly Paul. Kelly resides in Bowling Green, Kentucky with her husband, U.S. Senator Rand Paul, where they are members of Broadway United Methodist Church. She and Rand were married in 1990 and are the parents of 3 sons. Kelly is active in volunteer support and fundraising for Helping a Hero, a wounded veterans charity that has built over 100 homes across the country for veterans who have suffered multiple amputations, blindness, and other catastrophic injuries. Kelly serves as the Kentucky co-chair of the organization, which has completed 3 homes for wounded soldiers in her home state. Kelly is a graduate of Rhodes College with a degree in English. She has worked as a corporate communication manager for companies in the telecommunications industry, such as Sprint and Nortel Networks, as well as a freelance writer while raising her children. Today, she works in advertising and media consulting and serves on the board of the trustees for Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Kelly serves on the board for Coalition for Public Safety, which is a bipartisan organization dedicated to criminal justice reform. She is a frequent speaker and panelist for groups advocating for reduced incarceration rates, alternative drug policy solutions, and better employment opportunities for returning citizens. In May 2019, Kelly was awarded the Excellence in Advocacy honor in recognition of her efforts to pass the First Step Act, which was signed into law by President Trump in December of 2018. Kelly is a frequent guest speaker to civic, political, and faith-based groups across the country. She has appeared on Good Morning America, The View, The Today Show, Fox and Friends, Morning Joe, Sean Hannity, The Story with Martha McCallum, The Kelly File with Megyn Kelly, CNN New Day, Fox News at Night with Shannon Bream, and other nationally broadcast television shows. In April 2015, Kelly published True and Constant Friends. In her book, Kelly celebrates the inspiration and love we receive from the women in our lives through essays about her lifelong friendships, her mother, and her grandmother, who immigrated to America from Ireland in 1929. Kelly was the co-author of Rand's 2019 best-selling book, The Case Against Socialism. On their national book tour, Kelly and Rand gave joint presentations about the book in the media and to audiences across the country, including such diverse venues as the Reagan Library and Columbia University. Please join me in welcoming Kelly Paul. And if you can direct your attention to the video screen, we will show a short video while I'm making my way up the stage.
There's nothing that can quench that strength. That in my worst of times, that I've found a resource. It's a reservoir that's inside of me that makes me get right back up on my feet again and keep on fighting and keep on going. And I've learned to not live day by day, but to live moment by moment.
The video was brief. The first question is for Ms. Alice. President Trump said, "Redemption is at the heart of the American idea, and that's what this is about." Alice, you've become sort of the face of President Trump's criminal justice reform effort. Can you discuss how you got there? Your experience working with President Trump on this issue.
Yes, as many of you know, thank you so much for that introduction. I was a first-time nonviolent offender. I'd worked, I guess I lived what you call a pretty normal life. I was married at a very young age. After 19 years of marriage, I was divorced. I'd worked for FedEx as a manager for 10 years in computer operations and then customer support. I made a very bad decision after I lost my job, divorced, and in the midst of all of this, I lost my youngest son in a terrible accident. I'm not trying to, before I even go any further, I'm not trying to make excuses for my behavior because I did do something wrong. I became what is known as a telephone mule. I was asked to, under a very bad situation, bills were piling up. I'd become involved in gambling, and I can tell you that that is really what was the root of this thing, from one bad decision to another. But I was offered to the use of my telephone to pass messages doing this operation, and when everything came down, I found myself involved in a drug conspiracy. I went to trial for 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, I was convicted of attempted possession and sentenced to life, plus 25 years under the federal mandatory minimum guidelines. I was sent over 1,500 miles to the first prison. I immediately, when I arrived there, I saw a situation, and that was women who were very hopeless. I saw a situation where women did not have opportunities to take computer classes if they had long sentences, and that's when I started fighting for them. And I was able to change that and start offering hope to women. And that was one of the most important things that I believe I brought to the prison was hope. I started writing plays. I started getting women involved in doing things that they never thought they could do. I organized the first ever Special Olympics for women who had physical and mental challenges, and for that I received national recognition in prison from the Special Olympics, National Special Olympics. While I was in prison, I was able to mentor women. I started studying. I've always loved the Word of God, but I didn't know it. And that was really what was life-changing for me. I grew up in a very strong Christian family, and honestly, it was my faith that brought me through those dark years. And I found that by giving to others, by trying to be a positive influence where I was able to not only make a complete change in my life, but I was able to affect and see the effect of giving women an opportunity to do things, the changes that they made in their lives. I got certified in so many different, people would always see me show up for classes because even though I had a life sentence, I just did not believe that this was going to be the end for me. So I prepared myself for a future outside of prison. I became certified in electrical. I did so many things with doing Bible studies. I became certified. The college came out, the university came out. I became certified in pastoral counseling. And many times when our chaplain's lines were too long, I'd be their counselor. I'd be their comforter during times that women were struggling. I put together programs in prison, and I started reaching out to the community and doing things like putting on art shows and helping with community outreach work. I became well known in prison for being the mediator for bad situations. They would send me the young women, sometimes the old women too, who were having issues, and I'd become their mentor, and I didn't know that would mean they'd have to be in my room, but I'd become their roommate. But I saw incredible changes in the lives of women when you believed in them and you let them know that making a mistake in life, because I made a terrible mistake that I paid dearly for, but I don't believe that as a first-time offender that I should have been sentenced so harshly. While in prison, I I had completely clear conduct. The one time that I did get an incident report, they threw it out, even though I spent time in the hole, the shoe, but it was thrown out. So I left prison with a completely spotlessly clean record, and having left behind women whose lives have been changed forever.
Thank you, Alice. Kelly, you said that I'm a conservative, and conservatives love to talk about big government, and said that the criminal justice system is the ultimate form of big government. How did this philosophy play out amongst conservative lawmakers while you were advocating for the First Step Act?
Well, I think it resonated. I know that when I talk to diverse audiences, and there are progressives and conservatives, I always say that I think a lot of people that are on the left or progressive think when conservatives talk about big government, they're only talking about high taxes, regulation, that kind of thing. But I come from a more libertarian background, and my father-in-law, Ron Paul, I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He was a congressman, in the 70s and 80s. He was one of the first people to really talk about the unintended consequences of the war on drugs, and that was one of the things that he would always say. If we are going to harshly criminalize behavior that in most cases you're only hurting yourself, and not, again, I'm not an advocate for drugs, and neither was he, but at the same time, in overlooking opportunities for rehab or health care and going straight to incarcerating people, what have we done but just balloon our prison system, and women in prison? I mean, really, since the 90s, we've seen a 700% increase in the number of women that are incarcerated in this country. We are the most heavily incarcerated country in the world, which is just chilling because we're the land of the free. And so when we started looking at those statistics, I speak to my conservative colleagues, and I'm like, this is the ultimate form of big government, and you can't find a community that has not been decimated by this. If it's a young person who is just starting out and their life is just completely changed, and they then can't get a job, and they come out and they just are going to reoffend, if there is such a black strike against them in terms of trying to find a job or have another opportunity, or if it's a young mother who gets involved in drugs and then loses her children, and then the cycle continues and continues. So those are some of the things that we talked about, and really, my husband was elected in 2010, and he was advocating for a lot of these things almost immediately. He's worked with Cory Booker on the REDEEM Act, which was looking at the way we treat juveniles in prison. Also Kamala Harris on some bail reform issues. And what he found was that as he traveled around the country and talked about these issues, that there really was a bipartisan, diverse group of people that were beginning to change their mind about how we look at the criminal justice system. And you had small government conservatives, like what's happened in Texas, where they're saying this is just not sustainable in terms of a financial, the billions and billions of dollars, housing, mass incarcerating people was certainly not sustainable. You had people on the left, progressives, looking at it from a social justice point of view of what we're doing to our communities, and also the faith community. I think the faith community is a big part of this whole movement, and they are the ones that have really affected a lot of conservatives, because over and over again, you would see people in the faith community really on the front lines with families who had drug-addicted members or members with alcohol problems. And they, if you believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, you believe in, redemption and the power of freedom and the human spirit and dignity in every person. And so we had so many pastors and leaders in the faith community coming to us and saying, we don't think we need to be locking all these people up. You know, if it's someone in our church, we want to fight for them to get treatment and be able to turn around. So I just saw like such a wide variety of people coming together on this issue, and that's why, you know, it was really powerful to work on the First Step Act, because it was such a bipartisan effort.
Thank you. You bring up a good point. The faith-based groups are definitely a key in working through this. When I was ordained a deacon, I was working for probation and parole, and I had numerous people ask me, how can you be a probation officer and a deacon? Isn't there a conflict of interest? I was like, absolutely not. I said, you would be surprised at the number of people that are involved in law enforcement that have a faith-based background. We didn't get into it to be rich. There's that service to protect and serve, and probation and parole is definitely one of those groups that provides a service, and you're more of a mentor. And that gets back to where Ms. Johnson was mentioning about hope. And I'll tie in Romans, and without being a deacon and not quoting scripture, since my pastor's back there, I want to make sure we have this in. In Romans 8:24-25, St. Paul writes about hope. He says, "For in hope we were saved. Now hope that sees for itself is not hope. For who hopes for what one sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait with endurance." The opposite of hope, as we know, is despair. And Alice, you were given a life sentence plus 25 years. You were told that you would only leave prison in a coffin. What helped you wait with, as St. Paul said, with endurance? And how did you avoid falling into despair?
Truly, it was my faith in God. That is the one driving thing that kept me going. Also, I have a family whose faith-filled too. And sometimes I'm not going to tell you that every day was a good day, but every day truly was a God day for me in prison. And looking at people who didn't have hope, the one thing that I saw change the women was that hope. When I say that, believing in them and showing them that they can do something different, they had not seen what they could do. They had not heard applause, many of them, ever in their lives. And so by being able to accomplish something that they never thought that they could do, and I've had women tell me that I gave them a lot of hope too, because they knew that I was serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole, that no matter what I did, that no parole board would ever see my accomplishments. I'd never be able to stand before a parole board and say, I'm sorry, I did something wrong, but this is what I have accomplished while I've been here. They had hope just seeing me filled with hope and having me believe in them. And really that is what our foundation of our faith. Because as you said, hope that is seen is not hope at all. If I can see it, why am I still hoping for it? I still believed that one day that I would be a free woman. But even so, whether I'm free physically, I became free as a woman who was incarcerated. When they set me free to run across that road, I was really already free inside of prison. I was free because nothing can contain your dreams. I could still dream. I could still impart dreams, help others to dream too. So for me, that hope that you're talking about is what kept me going, and that hope is in the faith that I had in God.
Alice, we have the Secretary for Department of Corrections here. We have probation and parole leadership in the back. We have community leaders here in the room. We all want Louisiana to be reentry ready. What can Louisiana or states like Louisiana do for those people both inside the walls of prison and for those that have been returning back to society that will recognize human dignity, offer hope, and most importantly, a path to redemption? And you can give me the short version of that if you like.
I'll give you a real short version of that. I think inside of prison, there has to be programs that prepare them to rejoin the community. I'm a strong believer in dignity for people who are incarcerated. They are one day, most of them, I'm not sure of the exact figure, so I don't want to quote it, but I know it's in the 90s. Of 90-something% of the people who are incarcerated are one day going to return to their communities. So it just makes good sense that you want them to come out better than the way that they went in. And when they do come out, you want to make sure that there's things in place that would help them be a success as a returning citizen. These are going to be your neighbors. They're going to have children going to school with your children. You're going to be shopping in the store right alongside them. You're going to be at the movie theaters with them. No one comes out with a branded with a big scarlet letter on them so you know who the people are. They're you. They're your community. When one person goes to prison, their whole family goes right with them. So you want them to be successful. You want to be able to them to be able to get jobs. One thing that I don't hear a lot of talk about is the Fair Chance Act was passed and signed into law by the president in December. And that means that they have banned the box on federal jobs. Federal jobs, people with criminal records no longer are locked out of good job opportunities. So you want to make it a community where they have a pathway to success. You don't want prison to become a revolving door. And I've said this before, when they're in prison, they're locked in, and when they come out, they're locked out of good opportunities for employment, and many times housing too. We've got to be able to, as a state, Louisiana, great state. I love LSU. I want you to know that.
Go Tigers.
Yeah, but we have to be able to, on state levels, have opportunities when they come out. When I came out of prison, it was like coming out into a new world, like I had just landed on Mars, because there was no internet when I went in. And I came out and I had no idea how to use a smartphone or whatever, what a smartphone was, or what GPS was. When I heard this little sound in my daughter's car, I jumped, because I didn't know. I thought someone was in the car with us when I said when I heard beginning route. I'm like, who is that? Because I know in the back seat is my grandchildren. But just preparing people for the challenges they're going to face. And a big, big thing is identification. Is them having identification when they come out of prison. That was a very big challenge. Another big challenge was having some type of health care. I don't know where Louisiana stands with this, but when I came out, I was sick the second week and amassed a hospital bill with no insurance. So there's things that we can do, just really common sense things for people coming out of prison. You want them to be successful. You want them to be able to get housing. Housing is another big obstacle, because many people would not let ex-offenders rent from them. So you're locking them out of jobs, you're locking them out of housing. So what else is left? The streets. And then they're returning back.
Thank you. Kelly, Right on Crime created an employer's handbook, and I just happen to keep one with me wherever I go. It's a little bit of a joke. There's one at everybody's table. What are your thoughts on how we can engage employers and help remove the barriers to employment for those persons with criminal backgrounds?
Well, we're doing some of that in Kentucky. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce is really leading the way and encouraging a lot of businesses to give formerly incarcerated people a second chance. The faith community is also galvanizing and starting whole organizations where they're specifically hiring folks that are either in halfway houses or people that are just coming out of prison and giving them these opportunities. In my town, we have an organization called Hope House that is 100% devoted to working with businesses in our community and encouraging them to give people another chance, give them an opportunity to learn a trade. And that's been very successful. As Alice said, if you don't have a path forward, then you're just going to go back to what you were doing before. So we are seeing that. I think in some cases, expungement is important, letting people clear their records or not having to check the box if they have been deemed that they are rehabilitated. Otherwise they're just not going to have a chance to really start over again.
May I say one thing, too?
Yes, you may.
I know this is kind of going, I don't know if you had this as a question, but I just want to say that we have to not look at when a person fails on the job if they're formerly incarcerated. When you hire an employee who has absolutely no criminal record, you're taking a chance on them too. And they fail sometimes. But when someone fails, then we look at, oftentimes people look at that one failure and now you've got an excuse to do what you wanted to do in the first place. And that was not hire any other formerly incarcerated. When I was set free, I was set free. Before my release, many people were afraid because of the Willie Horton. That was a bad story. And they were afraid, lawmakers were afraid that this would be another thing that could possibly backfire. Because Willie Horton, when he was one of the men who got out and did something terrible. And so the whole tough on crime era was really, it was hyped up. Politicians used that to say that this could be another Willie Horton situation. But we've got to really put people before politics and know that if someone makes a mistake, a free person could have made a mistake who didn't have a criminal record, and don't just use that to continue to promote our own biases. To look at this as a failure, but then we'll have one failure and 99 success stories, and the concentration is on that one failure, and that becomes the excuse to continue on a bad pathway of being more hard.
Thank you. I totally agree. Kelly, you mentioned earlier about the incarceration rate, and Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the world. The 2017 Justice Reinvestment Initiative reforms that were modeled after evidence-based research, as well as the reforms from red states like Texas, were enacted to help address Louisiana's over-reliance on incarceration for nonviolent individuals. How do you see conservatives engaging the effort to recalibrate the focus away from incarceration and more on evidence-based diversion-type programs?
Well, I think that we're trying to look at things that are going to encourage a positive outcome. And, I look at, again, one of the things that Alice spoke to that is so important is to use that time while you're in prison to actively rehabilitate people and teach them something new. I know in California there's a new initiative that's sponsored by one of the tech companies out there. I think it's called Slack, where they are teaching incarcerated prisoners how to code so that when they eventually are released, they have this valuable skill. And actually some of them are even able to do some coding work behind bars that the company is using. So they're getting that experience. So those are the kind of things that we're really trying to encourage. Again, with the faith-based organizations, I'm close to a group in Kentucky also called Isaiah House. And one of the things that they do is they have, and this is a male-only halfway house, but they teach them all kinds of building trades. They have a lawn and landscape business, and they call it clean and sober workers, clean and sober builders. I mean, they've learned masonry, and they tell me that they're actually in very high demand because we are at a time in our country now where we have almost full unemployment. It's hard to find people to do a lot of these things. A lot of people don't know these trades, and so these individuals are getting that kind of training. They're having, as Alice spoke to, the dignity and purpose that only comes from work. I mean, if you come out of prison and you don't have an opportunity to get up every day and go do something, that's just bad for the human spirit. I don't care what position you're in life. You have to have something that you're getting up and doing every day. And at Isaiah House, their workers are very much in high demand, frankly, because we do have a drug problem in this country, even among people who haven't been caught or haven't been incarcerated with it. And the Isaiah House workers, of course, they're drug tested while they're living there, and they have a van taking them to work every day. And the guy that runs it said, we are some of the most popular contract workers here because they know our workers will show up on time, they are drug-free, they're alcohol-free. And I've met several of the men who have graduated from that program who are now very successfully working in masonry and electricians, and they've got that kind of training. So I think in the end, it all comes back to work. I mean, giving people the ability to support themselves and have a purpose in life, that cannot be underestimated.
Thank you. Alice, from the early beginnings of John Augustus, who was the father of probation and also a bootmaker, I don't know if those two tie in, but somewheres they did, the community has been involved in helping persons who are involved with the criminal justice system and also helping these people reintegrate back into society. If you could be the voice of those currently in a Louisiana prison who will be released, what would you say to the people in this room in terms of the obstacles that they will face and the support that they will need to be successful? And I think you touched upon a few of those things, but what are some of the things that people here in Louisiana would face as they're coming out of prison?
Well, they're going to be coming out facing, first of all, the stigma of being an ex-con. So I speak to the faith community first and ask you, many of those in the faith community have sinned. I don't think any of us are without sin. We as a faith community have to extend grace to those who are coming out of prison. We have to set the example. The church used to be where everything was happening at. And the church needs to rise up again and let their voices be heard and not be silenced by all of the other noise that is going on around you. So I say the church got to get back to doing church business again. And that's welcoming the people back in not only saying, welcome back to church, but put some feet to it, put some action to it, because many of them come out without clothing. They come out with just the basic necessities of hygiene items. And I think the church could help us too in leading the way with helping with this whole redemption of bringing them back into the fold and making them not feel that they're going to be ostracized. And as community leaders, as business owners, I would say everyone is not going to be a perfect fit for you. But if they do fit the criteria that you're looking for, give them a chance. And realize that these are human beings. You'll find that many of them want so bad to be given a second chance. I've heard employers say that these are some of my best employees because they know they're still on probation or parole, whatever they're on. Give them a chance, and if they fail, give someone else a chance. But make sure you've got try to just look and see those who will be a good fit. And a lot of them are not going to have, and this is something, if you are an employer who hires a formerly incarcerated, you've got a great resource right at your fingertips. Get someone who has been a success with your business and get them to walk alongside someone else that you're hiring and let them know that they're not the only one. And it does something when you know that you're not alone, that you've got someone else who has been a success in this company. So let them use them as your resource to help mentor others. But we've got some good resources. We've got some good people. We've got some great opportunities as a community and as probation. And when I came out on commutation, I kept all of the conditions of my release. I'm also on supervised release. But my probation officer, she said she wished she had 100 more Alice Johnsons because I dot every T and I dot every I and I cross every T because I know that I really don't even need supervision because all of you supervise me. I'm always in the news. I'm always everywhere. So I kind of feel like it's a waste to have me on supervision because the public supervises me. And that's another thing is unnecessarily long supervisions too. But I speak to you as being the helpers of those who are coming out, and they're dependent upon you. I speak very highly of my probation officer because she has been, I'm going to say she has been a friend. I can call her and ask her anything that I don't know and not feel stupid. I can ask her stuff sometimes before I can ask my family. She's come alongside me to want me to be a success. She's one of my biggest fans, one of my biggest supporters. And I just say to law enforcement, I think that you also play a role in the successful reentry and what you can do as mentoring someone who has been released from prison. That would make a world of difference to have someone who's in law enforcement that is your mentor. So I'm sure there's a lot of other things, but I just commend everyone who's doing the job out here because we really do want to be safe too. And we really do want to walk alongside you and be a success.
Thank you, and I totally agree. As a former probation officer, I think it's great to have the secretary here, to have Pete Freeman, the entire headquarters staff of probation and parole. I think it shows from the top down that probation and parole is seeking to change that old culture of bringing back a mentor, a person that is there to help you move along. And as a former probation officer, we would love to have had 100 of any people in a caseload, because caseloads were at 145 or 140 before the reforms were in. Now they're down to 115, 120, which is great, because then the probation officers can do exactly what your probation officer is doing, is offer you advice, mentoring you, and moving you forward through that reentry process. Kelly, moving into specialty courts, Louisiana has invested in specialty courts such as drug courts and even veterans courts. And the purpose of the Veterans Court is to help veterans who are engaged in the criminal justice system obtain the needed resources to once again lead productive lives. And the same issues, the court offers rehabilitation, employment, housing, food, and other needs while helping them resolve their criminal charges. What are your thoughts on the veterans courts and just specialty courts in general, like drug courts, as an alternative to incarceration?
Well, obviously, I'm a huge fan of that, and I think that we definitely need more of it. A part of the whole movement behind the First Step Act was that mandatory minimums had taken away discretion of judges, and so we need more discretion from judges and the ability to put people to look at the given situation and not be hamstrung by the law and say that you have to have something like a life sentence, for example, with 25 extra years. Those kind of things are based on I think probably too much high-level decision-making, and the decision-making needs to be more down where the people are actually seeing what's happening. And a lot of times in a drug court or a family court, you can do that, and it's going to result in a much more just outcome for people.
Thank you. Alice, this session, lawmakers here in Louisiana will be debating the use of solitary confinement in Louisiana's prisons for pregnant women and for persons with mental illness. But I would like to ask you about the use of solitary confinement more generally, since I understand that there was a point you mentioned earlier that you were in the SHU for 14 days, and I think it was the interview with Kim Kardashian that they saw that actually landed you in solitary confinement. Can you share about your experience and your thoughts about solitary confinement in our prisons in general?
I think solitary confinement must be did away with. It's very dangerous. You've got an officer. It's not like being on suicide watch. When you're on suicide watch, someone is always sitting there with you. Because I've been a suicide watch companion before, where I was the inmate companion to help the officers watch someone who's on suicide watch. And in solitary confinement, no one is watching you. I've known women who have committed suicide on solitary confinement, one in particular, who's a friend of mine. And the officer goes by in shifts, but you learn their that's been incarcerated besides myself. So it began a cycle of my incarceration directly was related to him later on being incarcerated. He's free now, but it took a very bad mental toll on him because he was the one who was driving the scooter when his little brother was killed. And so he didn't get any mental health. I didn't get any mental health. So my family was torn apart. My husband, he was nowhere. My ex-husband was nowhere around. He offered them no support, and they were just out there. I mean, I was really the nucleus in our family, and I was taken away. And I remember the day my son came to see me in prison, in a county jail, before I was shipped away to a federal prison. And he looked at me and he said, "Mama, when are you getting out?" Even though I had just been sentenced to life. And I couldn't answer him. And he just dropped his head. And so my children didn't have the, I mean, you're never going to see your mother. In fact, one of them told, that this is truth. One of the officers told my daughter after my sentencing to kiss your mama goodbye because you will never kiss her again free. And it was really, really, really hard on my children. I never had a relationship with my grandchildren except prison communication. I had one grandson who was 18 months. They fought for me. They even went to the White House and held prayer vigils outside the White House. I think it was 2015 or 16. My daughter started a petition, but it was hard because they could never. In fact, one of my family members said to me, one of my children said, visiting you in that prison is like visiting a grave site. They said, we can just come and view your body and never take you home. We can see the place where you lay, where your stone is at that building, but we can never take you home. So it has a devastating effect on families and on communities, and permanently on my youngest son.
Kelly, thank you. We appreciate all the work that you and Rand do on this particular issue and all the other issues, especially veterans and the issues in the community. Alice, you truly are an extraordinary example of rehabilitation. Thank you for making the trip down here as well. We will go ahead and open up for audience questions. If you have a question for Alice or for Kelly, raise your hand and the woman in red will bring you the microphone, which is over here. You're getting warmer.
All right, I got it. We're in business.
There's a question over there.
Probably mine is more of a comment than a question, and I too want to thank you guys for being here today. It means a lot, for our state. And Scott, thank you and Right on Crime for the things that y'all have done over the last few years in helping support our initiatives. And all this, when I look back, and y'all covered the gamut really of the things that we need to be doing and the challenges that we're faced with. And one of the things that, and we're not completely overcome is a cultural shift for our employees in the department. Going from, the war on drugs that you talked about, we lost. We lost the war on drugs. There's no question. Drugs won. So that's a challenge. But when you have correctional officers, you really have to work with them, and a training part of this is so important. And Pete and them, they've done a great job in shifting the culture. When I hear from returning citizens that I know I can go to a district office and get help. That's a cultural shift in the way we were doing business prior to all this. I'm proud of what we've done in Louisiana. I think our reform efforts are having a major impact. And as Scott mentioned, caseloads in probation and parole have dropped from 148 till now 113. We started at 72,000, I believe, Pete, somewhere at maxed out, and we're now below 58,000 on probation and parole. Our prison population is down by almost 10,000 since 2012. So when you look at the highest incarceration rate in the world, we're still there, but our incarceration rate has dropped from 860 to below 700. So that percentage drop is what's really important for us. We're making headway. We're getting closer to the second place, if you will. Not that I'm proud of that, but we've made a lot of progress, and it's good to hear from you guys. I really appreciate hearing from you because it confirms for me that what we're doing is the right thing to do. We know that, but from hearing people like yourselves, it's important to us. So y'all hit on it. Diversion programs, are so important. Our reentry courts, we investing in our criminal justice reform. We are reinvesting funding into our specialty courts through the Louisiana Supreme Court, which we know is important, and having an opportunity other than prison is important, and we're certainly working on that. It obviously needs to grow a lot more than where it is today, but I think those are the kind of options we look at. And look, y'all hit on it, housing and employment. We are struggling big time with employment. And Scott, you've been around the state. You guys are doing everything you can, but sometimes I feel like we're preaching to the choir in some of the meetings that we have. It's getting the right people to the table is so important. And example of that is that coastal restoration in Louisiana is going to be a big deal employment-wise. I got Chip Klein, a director of coastal restoration, to let me sit down with employers and meet with them and talk to them personally on what your challenges are, what can we do to get you to look at our returning citizens and the people that are coming back to our communities. And we're making progress, but we have a long ways to go. Housing, we're investing in that, but we have a long ways to go with that too. But we're making progress, and so I don't really have any questions. I just want to comment and thank you guys for being here today. So I appreciate that, and it's good to meet each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I just want to first of all thank both of you ladies, Ms. Alice, Ms. Kelly, for being here and giving us an opportunity to hear your story and what you support. My name is Representative Pat Moore, and I'm from Ouachita Parish, and that is in Monroe, Louisiana. And for years I've been concerned about this matter. My question to either one of you all is, can you support a federal law that would allow nonviolent criminals or inmates who are currently serving time be able to serve in the armed forces? And the reason why I ask that question is because my husband served in the Marines. I have two sons, one in the Air Force that served and in the Army. And I've had firsthand, I've witnessed how life can be changed and how it can make you a better person and so forth. And with the fact that we're going to have hundreds and hundreds of inmates returning without jobs, and especially those who are we have some that are highly educated in prison, but those that are currently serving time, instead of serving their complete term in prison, serve it in our armed forces. And I do believe that we do need more to give back and serve our country, so that could be an opportunity. So if you will, just share if that's something that you could support, a federal law allowing inmates currently serving time for nonviolent crimes to serve our country. Thank you.
Pat, thank you. Honestly and truly, I've never even heard of that before, but that is something that from what you're saying, that sounds like something that possibly I could definitely support that. I'm sure there will be certain criteria. Maybe they're coming toward the end of their short sentences. Even this just blows my mind. I'm just sitting here taking in what you've just said. But on the surface, that sounds like an excellent idea.
Is there a prohibition now if you are formerly incarcerated, you've served your time, you're out, against serving in the armed forces? I don't even know the answer to that.
I know in some areas, if you've got a misdemeanor and before you get a fine, the judge would encourage you to get incarcerated. But it's different on the if you're convicted of a felony or something like that. Because if you've been incarcerated, I don't know if the judge has that prerogative to have discretion to let you out. They probably don't. Now, what they'll probably do is that once you've been incarcerated and you've served a good bit of your time, you may be able to file a motion for early release or something like that. But normally, if you've got a conviction, the judge just can't let you out of circumstances like that. But that's something that we could probably look at down the road. Now, I've got an attorney from the corrections right here. She can also assist. You want to stand up and answer that? Yes. Yes, I know who you are. I need
Watch
some help
out, Leslie,
from
the bus is coming.
I need some help from you.
So, thank you. I'm actually not from corrections, but work with corrections. So, I'm assistant executive counsel to the governor, and I work with the criminal justice policy area in our office. And just to answer your question as to whether or not that's an alternative for sentencing, it's not. I don't know I don't know what the temperature is in the legislature to have that conversation in the future, but I would assume that that would be the direction that you would have to take in order to create that change or that opportunity for those individuals who, instead of being sentenced to a parish prison sentence or a sentence at DOC that doesn't require hard labor, maybe next year after next, I don't know. If you're interested in filing that legislation, that would be my suggestion.
And I think it has to be a federal law because of the armed forces, and it would come with criteria and good behavior and all of that. But it has to be on the federal level, at least from my understanding.
I do believe there is a prohibition.
I do believe there is a prohibition on if you have depending on what type of felony it is, if you have a record of being able to participate in the armed forces. I don't think it counts if it's a juvenile record, but I think if you have an adult criminal history, am I right, Andrew? That you can be prohibited from being, it can be prohibitive. Anybody else have any questions?
I think we're almost out of time. If we can take one more question.
Oh,
One more.
Oh, sorry. Run in.
Hello, my name is Shemitria, and I'm here representing the Justice Accountability Center. And I'm more on the advocacy side of it and community organizing and things like that. I just wanted to know, what words of encouragement do you have for someone who's fighting this fight that just seems so very long and tedious? But you said hope is what you had, and I think sometimes in the South, it's a little different atmosphere down here. So I would say maybe some words of encouragement to continue us to have hope, to have a vision, to be able to manifest this in the physical one day down the line instead of just talking.
I would definitely say don't give up. Don't give up. You may not be able to see things straight in front of you right now. I've heard someone say that we live life looking forward. We understand it looking backwards. You don't know what impact you're having. Your advocacy may touch someone that's going to have a great impact in this movement. If I had given up, I would still be sitting in prison. And if I had not been advocating, we've got 3 women who just received clemency on the 18th. These were all women who I was incarcerated with. And when I came out, not only have I advocated for them, but I've advocated for other women and other men too. And I didn't know that it was going to happen, that my release and my advocacy work would bring them home. But they're at home right now. In fact, I'm getting ready to go meet them in D.C. tonight.
Thank you. So from the Pelican State to D.C.
That's right. I'll be with Kim Kardashian tomorrow. And the president. I'm just kidding.
I like how you slipped that in right at the end. Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Kelly, for coming to the Pelican State to discuss how we can make Louisiana reentry ready. I'd also like to thank everyone that came here today and joined us in this very critical conversation that affects the lives of every person who lives in our great state. And may God bless you, and may God bless the state of Louisiana. Thank you.